The first scream echoed through the Cambodian jungle the exact moment lightning ripped across the night sky, and Sergeant Mason vanished into the darkness as if something unseen and hungry had torn him straight out of reality. Adam Bronson, known in the unit as quiet, but all he could see was the savage rain pouring down like a gray curtain. Corporal Reyes shouted Mason's name and rushed forward, but Lieutenant Harper grabbed him by the vest and yanked him back with force because the ground ahead suddenly collapsed into deep mud where violent water swirled as if something underneath it was moving. Thunder rolled above the jungle while the rain slammed against their faces so hard it became difficult to breathe, and the air filled with the smell of wet earth, rot, and old blood that could not be mistaken for anything else. Adam silently stared into the jungle through his scope, trying to catch even the slightest movement, but every flash of lightning only revealed twisted trees that looked like skeletal human arms before the darkness swallowed everything again. They had been in Cambodia for 6 days already, carrying out a classified mission near old war zones where during the Vietnam era not only soldiers disappeared, but entire patrols vanished without leaving behind a single official record. U.S. Command had sent them to investigate reports about an abandoned camp deep in the jungle where locals claimed armed men had been seen, but from the very beginning everything had gone wrong because the radios barely worked, the GPS constantly lost signal, and the jungle itself seemed unwilling to let them live alive. "We can't stay here," Reyes said with a trembling voice filled with fear and anger while pulling out his knife and looking around nervously. "We have to find Mason."
"Mason is already dead," Harper answered coldly, although even he did not sound convinced. Those words hung in the air like a heavy stone, and then, somewhere deep between the trees, a strange sound echoed through the jungle. Something between a human groan and the growl of a wild animal. Adam felt a chill crawl down his spine, even though the rainwater had already soaked through his uniform, and for the first time in many years, real fear slowly began tightening inside his chest. He was a sniper who had survived Afghanistan, Syria, and countless CIA operations nobody would ever hear about. But now, in the middle of the Cambodian jungle, it was not bullets or enemy soldiers that frightened him. It was the darkness itself. The storm grew worse with every passing minute, while water climbed above their ankles and the mud pulled at their boots as if the earth itself wanted to keep them there forever. Harper ordered the team north toward an old French bunker marked on the map from the colonial war era, and the group slowly pushed through the thick jungle while slipping in the mud and fighting off endless clouds of insects. Adam walked last, covering the rear, constantly glancing over his shoulder because the feeling that something was following them kept growing stronger. Every time lightning flashed across the jungle, he thought he saw tall, human-like silhouettes standing motionless between the trees, but whenever darkness returned, they vanished without a trace. After an hour of exhausting marching, they finally spotted the bunker, half flooded and covered with massive roots that had grown straight through the cracked concrete walls. The inside smelled of mold, wet dust, and something else that immediately made Thompson grimace because it smelled exactly like rotting flesh. Reyes started preparing a burner while Harper tried once again to fix the radio. But Adam stayed near the entrance, carefully staring into the black wall of jungle where the storm had become complete chaos. That was when he heard the voice.
Quiet, hoarse, almost drowned by the thunder. "Quiet! Help me!" Adam instantly raised his rifle while his heart slammed hard enough to shake his entire body for the first time in years. Mason stood between the trees.
His uniform was torn apart, strips of skin hung from his body, and his eyes were completely black, as if nothing human remained inside his skull anymore. "It came for us," Mason whispered in a calm, unnatural voice. "And now it's too late to run." At that exact moment, the lightning disappeared, darkness swallowed the jungle again, and somewhere deep within the trees came a horrifying roar that could not possibly belong to any living creature on Earth. The roar in the jungle faded as suddenly as it had begun, but something heavy and unnatural remained in the air afterward, as if the entire forest had stopped breathing and was now listening to every movement the American soldiers made inside the old French bunker. Adam Bronson kept his rifle aimed at the entrance, while streams of rainwater slid down the rusted metal door. Yet what frightened him most now was not whatever waited outside, but the silence that followed the terrible scream in the darkness. Reyes paced nervously along the wall, constantly looking over his shoulder as though expecting someone to suddenly appear behind him, while Thompson sat on the wet floor beside his backpack, checking the magazine of his rifle for the third time in only a few minutes. Lieutenant Harper tried once again to fix the radio, but the speaker produced nothing except static and strange hissing noises that sometimes sounded disturbingly similar to human whispering, until finally even he shut it off and cursed under his breath. Outside, the storm continued without mercy, and it felt as though every drop of rain in the world was falling on these cursed jungles, where the ground had become black mud and the trees looked ancient enough to have existed long before mankind. Adam slowly wiped water from his face and forced himself to focus the way he had during countless combat missions, but something deep inside him kept warning that no military training in the world could help them survive this place. He could not stop thinking about Mason's eyes staring at him moments earlier, because those had not been the eyes of a living man anymore, but black, empty voids where nothing human remained. Suddenly, they heard splashing water outside, as though something massive was slowly circling the bunker directly beneath the walls, and the sound immediately forced everyone into silence while their weapons snapped toward the entrance. The footsteps were slow and heavy, but there was something disturbingly deliberate about them, as if whatever waited outside was in no hurry and was enjoying the fear of the trapped soldiers inside. Thompson quietly whispered a prayer, while Reyes tightened his grip on his rifle, though the panic in his eyes made it obvious he was already close to breaking after Mason's disappearance. Adam carefully stepped closer to the door and felt his heartbeat quicken, because now he could clearly hear breathing from the other side, deep and wet, and it definitely did not belong to a human being. The first impact slammed against the bunker so hard that the old concrete walls trembled, while dust and dirty water rained from the ceiling directly onto Reyes. The second strike hit even harder, and the heavy metal door visibly bent inward as though something unbelievably strong was smashing against it from outside.
Thompson stumbled backward in terror when a horrible scraping sound echoed through the bunker, like long claws dragging slowly across metal. The air inside smelled of damp concrete, gunpowder, and fear, while thunder outside mixed with the heavy breathing of whatever stood beneath the storm. Reyes was seconds away from firing blindly through the door, but Adam motioned for him to wait because instinct told him that panic was exactly what the thing outside wanted. Then, from the other side of the door, they heard Mason's voice. It sounded quiet, hoarse, and terrifyingly calm, as if the dead sergeant was standing only inches away from them and smiling in the darkness. "Let me in, guys. I'm freezing." Thompson's face turned pale instantly, while Reyes unconsciously stepped toward the entrance because the voice sounded completely real and painfully familiar. But Adam grabbed him by the shoulder and violently pulled him back, cold sweat running down his spine, because he knew with absolute certainty that the real Mason could not possibly be standing outside that door. For several long seconds, there was only silence. Then, the voice outside began to laugh. At first, softly, then louder. The sound slowly twisted into something monstrous and inhuman, a mixture of growling, cracking bones, and distorted voices layered together into one horrifying noise. Suddenly, the door shook from another violent hit, and long black fingers with torn flesh and unnatural claws suddenly pushed through a narrow crack in the metal. Thompson finally snapped and opened fire first, and the deafening gunshots exploded through the bunker as bullets ripped through the old door and into the darkness outside. In response, a scream erupted from the jungle, so horrifying that Adam felt his blood freeze inside his veins, because no living creature on Earth could possibly make such a sound. Moments later, the footsteps slowly retreated back into the jungle. But the worst part came seconds afterwards. From the dark hallway behind the soldiers came a soft whisper. "It's already inside." After the whisper echoed from the dark hallway inside the bunker, every man froze as if the air itself had suddenly turned to ice, and the storm outside no longer felt like the most terrifying thing surrounding them that night. Adam Bronson instantly spun around and aimed his rifle into the black corridor leading deeper beneath the old bunker, but the beam from his tactical flashlight revealed nothing except wet concrete walls, covered in cracks and strange dark stains that looked disturbingly similar to dried blood. Thompson struggled to breathe while gripping his rifle so tightly that his fingers turned white, and Reyes swallowed nervously without taking his eyes off the darkness ahead, which now seemed alive somehow, as though the night itself were watching them from inside the tunnel. Lieutenant Harper ordered the team to clear the corridor, although even his voice no longer carried the confidence of a commander used to controlling every situation, because the mission had already become a desperate fight for survival. Adam moved first, stepping slowly across the flooded concrete floor while cold rainwater gathered around his boots, and every sound echoed through the bunker as though someone invisible was following them only a few feet behind. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became, filled with the smell of rot, mold, and something sweet yet rotten at the same time, forcing Thompson to repeatedly cover his mouth to stop himself from vomiting. The corridor eventually led downward until they reached a rusted steel door covered in scratches so deep and violent that it looked as though someone had spent years trying to claw their way out with bare hands. Adam swept the flashlight across the wall beside it and immediately felt his pulse quicken when he noticed words carved directly into the concrete in English. "Don't let them in." Reyes forced out a nervous laugh and claimed it was probably left behind by American soldiers during the Vietnam War, but nobody truly believed that explanation anymore, because every one of them could feel that whatever haunted this place was far older than any war. Harper ordered the door opened, and the moment the rusted metal groaned inward, a wave of rotten air burst from the room so violently that Thompson turned away in disgust. Inside was a massive underground chamber flooded nearly to their knees, while human bones, rusted military helmets, and decayed pieces of old American uniforms lay scattered along the walls. Some of the skulls still carried bullet holes, but most of the skeletons looked shattered in impossible ways, as though something unimaginably powerful had literally torn the bodies apart. Adam slowly searched the chamber until he noticed an old U.S. Marine dog tag nearly consumed by rust, and beside it lay a leather-covered journal that somehow had survived the moisture. He opened the first pages and saw shaky, uneven handwriting. The journal belonged to an American unit that had hidden inside the bunker back in 1971 after their patrol vanished during a violent jungle storm. But the further Adam read, the more chaotic and terrifying the entries became. The soldier wrote that at night they began hearing the voices of dead squad members calling to them from outside the bunker, and soon the men inside started disappearing one by one until the survivors finally understood the rule that kept them alive. Do not let them in, even if they speak with the voices of your friends. Thompson whispered that they needed to leave immediately, but at that exact moment, a gunshot exploded somewhere above them, followed instantly by Reyes screaming in terror. Adam sprinted back through the corridor as fast as possible as water splashed beneath his boots and his heartbeat pounded violently inside his chest. When they returned to the main bunker room, Reyes was gone. Only his rifle remained on the flooded floor beside a long trail of blood that disappeared into a dark opening in the wall where no passage had existed minutes earlier. Thompson completely lost control and began shouting that they had to run immediately, but Harper screamed at him to shut up, even though he himself looked moments away from collapsing in fear.
Then, from deep inside the hidden passage, they heard Reyes's voice. Weak, painful, terrified. "Adam, help me. It took me down here." A cold wave of horror spread through Adam because now he finally understood the truth. The jungle surrounding the bunker was not simply killing people. It was using their voices, their memories, and their fear to lure the living into the darkness. Reyes's voice echoed from the dark passage hidden inside the bunker wall, and every word sounded so painfully real that for a brief second, even Adam Bronson felt the urge to run forward and drag his friend back from whatever nightmare waited below. Thompson nearly stepped into the opening, but Adam grabbed him by the vest and slammed him against the wall because he finally understood that the real Reyes was either already dead or trapped somewhere deep underground where no human being was meant to go. Lieutenant Harper stared into the darkness with trembling eyes, trying desperately to convince himself that everything happening around them could still be explained by exhaustion, fear, or hallucinations brought on by days lost inside the jungle. Then, Reyes's voice came again from the passage, louder this time and filled with so much terror that even the concrete walls seemed to shake beneath the sound. "It's coming! Please don't leave me here!" Thompson finally broke. Ignoring Adam's warning, he rushed into the darkness with his flashlight cutting wildly through the tunnel while his footsteps splashed deeper and deeper below. Only seconds passed. Then, a gunshot exploded somewhere underground. Another followed immediately after, and then Thompson screamed. The sound ended abruptly, as though something enormous had wrapped itself around his throat and silenced him instantly. After that, there was only silence. Outside, the storm still hammered the jungle without mercy as rainwater streamed down the bunker walls as though the entire structure was slowly drowning together with the men trapped inside it. Harper pulled out his pistol with shaking hands and whispered that they needed to leave immediately. But before either of them could move, the radio attached to his vest suddenly crackled to life by itself. Through the heavy static came an old voice. "Weak, broken. If anyone hears this, don't let it out of the bunker."
The transmission was suddenly overwhelmed by gunfire, horrifying screams, and a monstrous roar that sounded more like an animal than anything human, before the signal died completely. Adam realized they had just heard the final radio recording of the American unit that disappeared there decades earlier. Then he heard something else. Footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps splashing through water somewhere deep inside the tunnel. Getting closer. Harper aimed his pistol into the darkness, but his hands shook so violently that Adam immediately understood the lieutenant was already broken by fear. Then Thompson emerged from the passage, or at least what remained of him. His face had been torn apart, his jaw hung sideways, and his eyes were completely black, just like Mason's had been beneath the storm. He stood unnaturally still, while a blood-covered smile slowly spread across his ruined face. "It wants to get out," Thompson whispered, in a voice that no longer belonged to him. Harper screamed and opened fire first. Gunshots exploded through bunker, while bullets ripped through Thompson's body, yet he kept walking forward as though pain no longer meant anything to him. Then, something enormous crawled out of the darkness behind him. Adam only caught fragments of it in the flashing muzzle light: long black arms, wet gray skin, and a horrifyingly thin body moving with broken, jerking motions, like a gigantic spider wearing human flesh. Its pale eyes glowed in the darkness. The creature lunged at Harper so fast that the lieutenant never even had time to scream. Blood sprayed across the concrete wall as Harper's body disappeared into the tunnel alongside the sickening sound of snapping bones. Adam realized he was alone. The bunker was flooding, the storm still raged outside, and the creature slowly turned its head towards him, as though it savored the fact that its final victim had nowhere left to run. But Quiet refused to die in that place. He tore the last phosphorus grenade from his pack, pulled the pin, and hurled it directly into the darkness before sprinting towards the bunker exit as fast as he could. The explosion shook the entire structure. Flames instantly swallowed ancient roots, rotten wooden supports, and the tunnel itself, while an inhuman roar thundered through the jungle with enough force to shake the ground beneath Adam's feet. He burst into the storm and ran through the flooded jungle without looking back, even though he could still hear something massive moving within the fire and collapsing ruins behind him. All night long he ran through mud, rivers, and endless rain, while branches tore at his skin and exhaustion slowly destroyed what little strength he had left. At sunrise, a U.S. evacuation helicopter finally found him near an old riverbank at the edge of the jungle. By the time the medics pulled him aboard, Adam was barely conscious from fever and exhaustion, but just before the helicopter doors closed, he looked down one final time at the endless Cambodian jungle below. And there, standing motionless beneath the rain between the trees, was a tall, thin silhouette with glowing white eyes staring directly at him, as if it already knew that one day Quiet would return.